Joel, from what I've picked up from the Alternative Guitar Summit, uh, and I traced backwards who are people involved in that project and who established that and what are these musicians as individuals, you have to come down to you as a founding member. And from you being a founding member, you are a guitar player, composer, arranger, educator, and the list goes on. And you have got multiple awards for your work, but that work is the whole catalog of 20 albums, and more music is coming, I'm sure. Uh, uh, if you could tell me, what was your journey with your instrument, with your guitar, when you started as a young musician, let's say when you were 15 onwards?
Oh, well, let me try to keep this short because I don't want to bore people. There's a lot of history there. So I'm gonna just give you the, as they say, the Reader's Digest version of this. Like so many players, I started with rock music, classical music as well, but I took classical lessons. But I started with the rock music at the time, and I can especially relate to students now who are rock players trying to learn jazz because that was really my journey. Fortunately, I did discover jazz at a pretty early age, 15 or 16. I've been playing for maybe 4 or 5 years, but I always believed that music was a great open field, and all kinds of music always interested me. It was very hard for me to ever focus on one thing. I would go through periods where I'd focus on trying to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan or Duane Allman, and then I'd try to really learn something from Wes Montgomery and Jim Hall, and then I tried to learn African music, and I played in a reggae band, and uh, I listened to Brazilian music, and then I tried to learn about odd times from Bulgaria. It's just endless. And it took a while, but eventually I began to realize that when you're like that, and I think this is pertinent to all students, when you have that open mindedness, which is a wonderful thing, you also need a foundation. You need a root. Your foundation can be rock, it can be jazz, it can be bluegrass. Whatever it is, everything must lead back there and grow off of it, or else you're drifting. And so my foundation did become jazz, but I'm not what you call a pure jazz player, one of those people who's learned hundreds upon hundreds of standards and play in every key. You know, that is a lifetime's work in and of itself. But it is at the core of what I do, and I love the music. And along with that training and that approach to improvisation, I've tried to bring along everything else that I love. I did get a degree in music from a college in upstate New York, Bard College. I'm not sure how much good it did me. I had a lot of bad educational experiences. Uh, and fortunately, in between all of those, some great teachers that sort of saved me. And often I had to find them on my own. Amongst those was Mick Goodrick, who I studied privately with for 9 months or so, Rand Blake. I studied with Jimmy Wyble, a little known but important guitarist when I was in school in LA. And I studied composition with Loudon Matthew and Joan Tower. But one of the things that made me start the Alternative Guitar Summit was this frustration that I'd had so many educational experiences that were unsatisfying that I wanted to provide an educational experience that was very satisfying. So it motivated me.
How did Alternative Guitar Summit start? Uh, So you started that with your pure motivation, with your own energy.
Yeah.
How did you develop it into such a growing community, A, of students, and B, of incredible musicians, as being on your being your staff members there? That's fantastic.
Well, um, first of all, you know a little bit about this from what you've told me because, yes, I started it all on my own with no institutional support. Um, and I didn't really know what I was going to turn it into. All I knew was that somebody asked me to host a concert series for 3 nights in Manhattan about 11 years ago and invite guitar players to play. And I thought it went so well, and I kind of had a knack for it, and I enjoyed it that I decided to do it again. And there were growing pains because you know, some of the concerts I produce, usually three all together in a year, um, nobody showed up at. I mean, really, I'd have 7 people come to a concert, or a snowstorm would happen. And one year I had a great series at Rockwood Music Hall, and I swear to God, it was the coldest weekend in 20 years, and attendance was terrible, and they refused to ever have me back. So I say this because when you organize something like this, it's not for the faint of heart. But every year I would say I'll never do this again. This is just stupid. What am I doing? There was always a period where I would say that when I was sending out the publicity or pulling my hair out for one reason or another. But when the music happened, it was so satisfying that I always had to continue. And what made me continue was that from many, many years of attending concerts and learning about the guitar and developing a community of friends and musicians, I could see that it was important. I knew that in my small way, I was providing an outlet for what I considered was the best music of our time. And that we, as musicians who are non-commercial, need those outlets. And some incredible music happened. And I was like, wow, I just have to keep doing this. So my business model had to change a little bit because I realized for people to learn about this, I really did have to involve better known players. At first I thought, I just want to give work to people that nobody's heard of, that type of thing. Not nobody, but the under the radar people who I valued so much, who I thought deserved wider recognition. I still do that, but thankfully I've also included some of my heroes in the past few years, and that has enriched the whole thing because not only have we been able to experience their wisdom, which has really been gratifying and for which I've received a lot of thanks from our fellow fans. But once people hear about these better known people, then they are turned on to the lesser known people, and the whole thing starts to build. So then I started the camp, and that's been incredibly satisfying because I love teaching and I love learning. And I also felt as if I had a lot to offer and no place to offer it because, nobody's hired me at a university. I wish they would, but I don't even have a master's degree. I was too stupid to go out and get the type of degree that I would have needed to more easily teach at a place like Berkeley or New England Conservatory or the New School or whatever it may be. And so I thought, you know what? I'm not going to let that deter me. I'm going to start my own little school. And the same way I said, I'm going to start my own concert series. And I found some people to help me with funding, with a place to do it. And I think just now, with what's happened this past year with the pandemic and some new fans I've gotten I think it's just starting to feel like it's got stability. Like people finally know about it. If you know about it, then I'm getting somewhere. I really feel that at first um, I wondered if that would ever happen, and I'm starting to feel now as if there's really a substantial um, foundation that I've developed that I want to keep growing.
The artists themselves were always happy to be involved in such a creative, environment, because they got to work with guitar players they wouldn't otherwise got to play with, because a guitar player doesn't hire another guitar player to have two guitar players in the same band. There are
Oh, it's so
exceptions, of
fun.
course, but
My God,
usually
at our
people
summer camp when we all get to play together, I mean, here I am the first day of camp, and I'm playing seven come 11 with Julian Lodge. I mean, it's just fantastic. So the teachers have as much fun as the students.
what programs are you preparing for 2021? What it is that Alternative Guitar Summit will be doing?
Well, now we have already had our first virtual concert series, which was an enormous success, and hopefully we'll host that again. I'm starting a Patreon site for subscribers in May, where we'll post footage from past concerts and have new artists give master classes and the like. That's sort of my next big push. And we also had our virtual camp, which went really well too. I was resisting virtual events. Nobody really loves them. We want to be live, but I think that we've realized now that they're here to stay. But still, in 2021, we have the in-person camp in August, and I do believe that COVID will have gone away enough, and we have enough protocols in place that are pretty strict, so the camp will go on and work well. For a few days at the end of August, we've got Kurt Rosenwinkel, Julian Lodge, Gilad Hexelman, John Schofield, uh, Tim Miller, and myself all in one place. And if you're a guitar player and you don't want to be at this camp, you're crazy. So please sign up.
uh, it's a lovely environment to be in, musically speaking, but also geographically. It takes place in a full moon resort.
Yes, in the
So
Catskill Mountains, it's gorgeous. My God, it's beautiful, and everybody. The benefit of this is also is I love the idea of creating community. One of the fun things about being a musician is not only playing with other people, but developing this larger connection to the world with our fellow musicians, and a lot of that goes on.
the camp feeds certain information to students, but also the students come in with certain information to feed you guys. They may not know how to execute it properly, but they already have some nuances in them. It could be a completely strange tuning of their instruments, or it could be a completely different history how they learn to play the instruments. Some probably students will have even perfect pitch, and they definitely play slightly differently than the others. Uh, what have you uh, what have you learned from the students and from this experience as a guitar player and also as a guitar teacher?
Well, I think there's two questions there. What have I learned, and also what is the experience of having all these different students show up? And what's really interesting is that, of course, depending on the teachers every year, and they're different. Certain people will come sometimes for a specific teacher more than another. But in general, we have this huge range of players. Somebody is into free improv, or somebody's into electronic sounds. Somebody's a really smoking jazz player. Somebody is a great rock player and wants to learn more about jazz. We had a guy who was a bluegrass player who enjoyed himself a couple of years ago. So it doesn't matter what your background is, in my opinion, if you're thirsty for knowledge. And that's something that I really find that for most people, even if they don't quite understand everything one of the teachers is saying, a seed is planted that's going to enrich them as a player and a human being. And I think that curiosity is at the heart of what learning is. And that's the most important thing as a student you can bring to any situation. You're hungry for knowledge, and it doesn't matter what that knowledge is, what it looks like. You want it. What I've learned is incalculable because I'm sitting there getting these lessons myself from the greatest players in the world. First of all, I get to play with them. And, you know, there's more that I'm getting in one day of this camp than I could possibly use probably for the rest of my life. So I just, like I'm everybody else, I pick 2 or 3 things to focus on after the camp, and I think all the teachers feel that way. They're like, "Oh my God, that was incredible! I want to go home and practice," because, I mean, it's humbling, is what it is, because, um, I'm sitting there watching somebody like Oz Noy play the guitar, and I'm going, Jesus, what? In my wildest dreams, I'm never going to be able to play like that, but that's okay. I can still be myself. So I'm a student too. I'm just sitting there like the students myself going, this is heaven. Having all this music here is just heaven.
What do you see as the biggest distraction for young students in 2021, for instance, or 2020? Uh, what would be the distractions mainly for guitar players? Is it maybe there's way too much material that we get distracted by it, or are we way too much focused on promoting the business side of it opposed to neglecting the artistic part? Or learning to play the instrument, or think what are the main roles of the music opposed to what is the role of my potential future business? Do you see any of these distractions that are quite noticeable?
I think that distractions for an artist are infinite. They change with time, but the nature of them is always the same. They're 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 pulling you away from your practice room. They're they're breaking your focus. Sometimes a distraction can be that inner voice that tells you that it's not worth it. You're never going to be good enough. Whatever it is, there's so much information now. It's true that I think for some students it's just kind of jumping from one thing to another and getting a rather shallow exposure to many different things rather than a deep exposure to 2 or 3 things. So my advice is always practice small bits of information in a big way. Don't practice big bits of information in a small way. Learn 10 tunes so well that you will never forget them. Don't learn 100 tunes and forget 99 of them. Right? You have to be very disciplined in that way, because your playing will lack depth if you avoid that. You have to immerse yourself so deeply in just 2 or 3 things in life. Maybe that's bebop. Maybe you are just going to learn how to play like Charlie Parker. Well, that's life. That's a lifetime right there. And if you add 1 or 2 things onto that, it'll be almost a miracle. Then you'll be somebody like Mike Stern. Um, right? So, who managed to add that great rock feeling to his bebop playing, or maybe it was vice versa. So, you are what you practice.
What do you see at the moment that would be the dream come true moment from an artistic perspective for
Ah,
the Alternative Guitar Summit?
well, first of all, to be honest, I would love to have institutional support. I'd love to have a big university with a lot of money say, we want to host this and we're going to pay for it. And if you raise a little money, that's great, but we have a big budget. And it's not impossible. So the pressures of trying to do this, I mean, I'm never paying people enough. Um, it's gotten better over the years, but people deserve to be paid well, and I can only do so much in terms of publicity, in terms of outreach. I mean, uh, there's a reason that um, that people do these types of things at major universities or conservatories. It's a lot easier. So that's one thing. Um, I would say also, I would love to find some way that I could have more than just one camp a year. That somehow, and I've looked into this. It's not easy. But for instance, what if there was an alternative guitar summit gathering in Europe? Is
Oh
that possible?
wow, yeah.
But I'd have to have somebody in Europe sponsor me. I can't get people to show up in Ireland. It's hard enough to get them to show up in New York. It's that's the reality of it. So if a music school in Switzerland or Dublin were to decide this was important, it would just be magical to me. I mean, I've come so close. I almost got one going on the West Coast. I was talking with people from Norway, but there's a lot on people's minds, and budgets are always tight. So, but we'll see. I'm starting a new record label for guitar music with the Alternative Guitar Summit, AGS Recordings. And I also have a book coming out. I don't know if you heard about this, of interviews with 27 guitarists called Guitar Talk. So that's kind of part of the whole thing also. So it's just about, you know, that's the type of book I wanted to read as a kid. So now I'm making that book. Um, and the type of music we'll record for AGS Recordings is the type of music I want to listen to and I want to find. So, I just have this vision, and I'm welcoming as many people into it as I can.